Hello, I'm Lisa Betts-LaCroix. Welcome to the Superpower You podcast. Today, our guest is Alan Sakian, and Alan is an interlocutor and a polymath and the host of the Simulation series, which is a live show and an event series. And for the first time ever, we are live on location and we are recording from the Simulation Series studio. So welcome so much to the Superpower You podcast, Alan.
Lisa, such a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to interview you. It wasn't that long ago that I was sitting in that chair and you were sitting in this chair and I was being interviewed for your show. So
3 months ago, your episode number 37
unbelievable.
On our show.
And
now we're on 160. This is 159, so 160 will be posted later tonight.
Amazing.
It's crazy.
Yes. So I always start my interviews off with a question about my guests' early days. And the reason is that I believe that our childhood and our families of origin lay a very important foundation for who we become in the world. So I'm wondering if there's anything that comes to mind for you from your early years or your family of origin that you think may have influenced the Alan Sakian sitting before me now.
Well, it'd be tough to identify something out of all of evolution that produced me.
Well, we can just stay within the time
Mom.
after your birth.
Yeah, exactly. Mom's been a massive influence on my life. Very grateful to have my mother and my uncle. They've just been massive influences on who I am, and I'm very grateful for them, and I'm very grateful for who was before them. And I always say this, but it's been 100 billion people that have lived and died on this planet to make the world that we live in now. Mm-hmm. So that's out of 7.5 billion people alive right now, that's only 7.5% of all of the people that have ever lived. So just thinking about the other 92.5 billion people is like, who were they? What did they build? What did they do? To have, because my mom and uncle weren't direct contributors to the electrical grid being made, or to all of these crazy healthcare advances that we have now, or to even the proliferation of language across the planet. So I'm just so grateful for everybody that's built the world that we live in. But a direct contributor, I guess, to my past is for sure my mom and uncle.
We'll say a bit more about them, because I love and appreciate your big picture and your meta perspective and the global aspect. And we'll talk a lot more about how you approach those topics from that way. But because my show is really so much about the personal, I really would like to dig in a little bit into who your mom was, like really in a really specific and maybe emotionally present way. Like, how did she make a difference in your life?
Yeah, that's, it's interesting that I want to stay on the point that you just described, which is that I frequently, and then we'll go back to what you asked me to do, I frequently go to the meta perspective, to this pale blue dot perspective of Earth, looking at Earth from the moon or from beyond it. And my insatiable drive, even you're like, Alan, like, stay with me, like, about you and about how you were directly influenced, and I immediately just go directly to that pale blue dot perspective. My insatiable drive to do that is kind of what gives me that edge of speaking about myself beyond myself.
Yes.
Because I don't actually, see so much benefit of talking about just my life. When we talk about the whole human perspective, we can better collectively move forward. But I also totally agree with what you're saying. So let's go back and dive deeper.
I'm gonna jump in to say, because I do believe that mothers are pretty foundational. Yeah. My guess is there's something about your mother, or you would not have raised her, that laid some aspect of the foundation for you to bring that superpower of looking at the meta.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is.
That's a good point. I think one of them was the drive for my mom to push me to read, and that increased my vocabulary, that increased my imagination. We did so much science and math together, where that I was just doing times tables like a frickin' G, just going, hammering them out, and it became just like second nature for me. when I was playing too much inside of the house, she would be like, go outside and go play outside. And I would just go play outside and go do random things besides kicking the soccer ball around, running around, exploring, playing with the grass and trees and water fountains and all this stuff. And I think that those little principles that my mom had were really crucial to me becoming who I am. And I think that for a lot of parents that are going through the process of raising kids right now, we're kind of addicted to the cell phone addiction and computer addiction, and we can actually find quite a bit of meaning and fulfillment in life by going and learning how to handle interpersonal relationships, going out into nature, doing things like, put down the phone and read. Read a book. It will help advance your life so much. When I finished interviewing Jordan Peterson, I asked him backstage afterward, I was like, how do I keep up? How do I keep up, like, intellectually? And he goes, read like hell. And that has also seeped deep into me. Now even if I can only sit down and read for like 20 or 30 minutes, I'm still flipping through as many pages, highlighting as much as possible, packing in that thought, maybe posting about it and going back to work, or going back to whatever I was doing before.
Well, it sounds like your mom not only modeled, but nurtured in a deep, deep way a love of learning. So it sounds like you have an insatiable desire to learn and a curiosity that came directly from your relationship with her and how she interacted with you and spent time with you. We
have a long lineage of family members that are teachers or engineers, business people. So it has, I think it is deep in our lineage, but also, I think a lot of it also has to do with just, you're born into this world. If your mind gets expanded to a new dimension of thinking of like, okay, crap, I need to learn more, then what do you do with that? You have full control. You sit down behind a computer and you're able to either browse mindlessly or you're able to specifically find a very high quality source of knowledge. And you get that choice every time you sit down. And now I rarely ever mindlessly, and when I do catch myself mindlessly, I'm like, what am I doing? And I go right back to finding a source of knowledge. This is so strange because I'm always like trying to figure out what is the next question I should ask.
You don't have to think
Lisa.
about the next question. So, okay, what I'm going to ask you about that is, it sounds like one thing that sticks out for me is that you're pretty young. You're 25?
25, yeah.
25. And that's a lot of intentionality for someone your age, and not to be dismissive of your age, but I mean, the level of thoughtfulness, self-reflection, and intentionality you just described about how you take on learning is pretty rich and deep. So is there something related to your mother or your uncle? You didn't really talk about your uncle yet, and I'm wondering if there's something that is specific to him in terms of your contribution and your development that may be different from that larger familial piece.
Yeah. So let's go 2 points there. The first point, let's talk about how there was this, when we were just meeting with Niru Khosla at the CK12 Foundation, which is focused on free K through 12 education, they had this kid interning for them that was like 12 or 13, 14-ish years old. And he was like, my dad taught me about the importance of finding high quality knowledge and working on high quality projects. He's 12, 13, 14 years old, right? So that's what I'm saying is like that parent, that kid, that is a really good example of an idea of what kind of a strong family connection and connection to knowledge that can be fostered throughout life. And then just to my uncle's been a massive role of me understanding a couple things really well. Time being something. I'm currently writing a lot about time. I thank him so much for teaching me about the importance of time. Also about doing things like understanding the way that money functions in society, economics and politics, both things like everything from the way that capitalism is functioning all the way to understanding how things like greed and crony capitalism have functioned in the world, and that's been very helpful to my understanding of both who I am today and it's just ridiculous looking back. I really want to thank you, Lisa, because I don't think enough times we take time to take a breath and reflect on our family and how our family and our lineage has impacted who we are. And I really thank you for taking time with me and just looking back and understanding it. So that's really cool that you do this on your show.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's really interesting and exciting. And as a person who's both a daughter and a mother, I think recognizing lineage and recognizing the connections in both directions is really profound and special. So thanks for recognizing that and for playing along with me. Tell us a little bit more about the trajectory of your life after your family. Like, how did you get here? Did you go to college? Did you have a good experience there? You know, I have a lot to say about college and where education is going, so I'm always curious to know what fascinating people have done in that domain.
Yeah, that's really good that you ask about that. And I think we actually talked to you about that when we hosted you on the show, about the future of education.
Yes,
you had
we
some
did.
really good things to say. Okay, so I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota until 17. Then I went to University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, and then I stayed there for 2 years until my sophomore year. I had tons of ideas and passion for entrepreneurship, and then these guys were constantly coming out for Silicon Valley and speaking at the club, and I was like, how do I execute all these ideas? And they were like, kid, go move to Silicon Valley where everyone's doing it. And so I left, took a year of absence, and I thought that I might go back, but I didn't end up going back. It was also a blessing that my uncle had already moved out to Silicon Valley, I believe 1 year prior to that, because he had also noticed that working in engineering and quality assurance engineering in Sioux Falls versus in Silicon Valley, he just figured out not only is he able to work on more impactful projects in Silicon Valley, but also get paid a lot more. And so he's at Intuitive Surgical, helping with the surgical robots there. And so he was kind of a very important stepping stone for me as well. When I came out here, I immediately got a job distributing fiber optics for AT&T across businesses and residences, and my uncle was a major stepping stone because I was able to stay with him in Fremont and commute the egregious 1 hour 45-minute commute into downtown San Francisco every single day, bus, BART, Muni. To work. It was crazy. And then
a lot of reading.
There was a lot of reading and thinking, but many times we don't really think about there's a really good quote. It's that the reason why I have such foresight is because I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I totally stand on the shoulders of giants. I've had so many of these amazing pillars / lily pads that I've been able to jump and step on along the way and work together with. But interestingly enough, after that transition from my uncle's place, it was really solid that I ended up moving into downtown San Francisco to live inside of some very, very poor single room occupancy housing units. And SROs are they're very dirty, and they need a lot of work and attention in San Francisco. And it's a big dichotomy between a single room occupancy inside of a kind of a dirty place versus the $3,000 to $4,000 a month 1-bedroom apartments that are built yesterday. It's crazy because it was like a 10-foot by 10-foot room with a queen-size bed in it for like $800 a month, and that was your space. And it was interesting to transition to that, but we already had a little bit of that in the dormitory life back in university. But I do think one of the most important things about the decision that I made to leave school and come out here was that I had seen what university life was like, and to me, it didn't fit me, and it's totally okay that it fits for other people. And I learned a lot from it, but also I learned much more from being able to immerse myself in the Silicon Valley, just build the future across so many different areas. And I'm just very grateful that I made that decision to come out here, and it's just rocketed. It's been another rocket.
Yeah, and how did you end up, did you know that you would be doing something along these lines. And by context, let me just say that from the short amount of time I've known you, and we were introduced by our mutual friend Keith Powers, who said you two need to know each other.
Yes, Keith's so cool.
Yeah, we were both wearing red shoes, I think. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah, because we were both like, we want to be eccentric, unusual. We like to be different. Yeah.
But so the thing that I recognize in you, or that I see in you, that I recognize in myself, is this desire and drive to both dig in and learn from other people, but also connect other people and highlight people and showcase other people's ideas and celebrate people.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, have you always had, because ultimately I'm always driving to what's your superpower and what's your strength. So I'm wondering to what degree in other parts of your life you saw this kind of skill set, inclination, that is this, personal connectivity, exploration, community building, I think, those kind of things. Did you imagine yourself doing something like this, and how did it come about?
It's also a really good question. I think that with who I've become now, I definitely never thought that I was going to be hosting people on a show that are scientists, entrepreneurs, game changers in their different industries. It was probably mostly the insatiable appetite for curiosity. But it's interesting because I also find myself kind of both very extroverted in my ability to just go out and just tap right into someone's soul and ask them the really important questions about who they are and what they're building into the world, which helps me a lot by parsing out at an event who is really important that I need to talk to, because I think we get lost in the Pareto distributions all the time, and we're not even aware that we're getting lost in the surface level stuff. And I like to go deep right away. And then also just, there was just something about that introversion as well, in the ability to just, I've been to 3 10-day meditation retreats, going on the 4th one later this year, and just the ability to go back inward. It helps me look in a mirror. We struggle a lot with looking in a mirror. And when I look in the mirror, I try to objectively have a conversation with myself about like, hey, how can I be better than I was yesterday? And then I go and I aim to do that as well as I can. And I think the introversion, like I like to read, I like to write, I like to be by myself as well. So it's a really healthy in that sense. But finding these different diverse minds and asking them questions, it's kind of like this whole
You're
principle.
just serving your own need. You're just serving your own desire, following your own curiosity?
Probably that's a big one of it. And then also just this, like what we were talking about earlier, I mean, can you believe that there have been 92.5 billion people that have lived before us, and there's 7.5 billion of us on this planet now? It's like, if we've actually been around that long, and I'm 25 years old, what do I know? Really, what do I know? Nothing.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt
Okay, we've got
here,
it. And for my listeners, we have Ron Vargas, who is going to interject now from his position over in the producer booth. And Ron, yes,
well,
please.
you said it there, Alan, in setting up for your question, that the planet and the universe is billions of years old. And what do I know at 25? Who's to say that you are not as equivalent to billions of years old as well? You are the product of billions of years in the making, and I just want to throw that in there. Now I don't have any proof, but we are billions of years old, not just 25.
We're a collective.
It's a
Yeah, that's interesting. What Ron brought up and what you just said too, Lisa, about this notion of some sort of other collective energy that exists within society that we don't understand that well because we're so locked into our own spirit of being that we can't really bridge out, and we haven't scientifically, objectively tried to branch into what that could be like. So maybe you guys are right, that maybe there is some sort of collection that this soul has accumulated over time, and I'm able to tap into that wisdom in some way. But just to follow up on this point about age, just what do I know? You know what I do know is that if I come into the conversation with someone that has already built something really fascinating into the world and they're working on trying to eradicate suffering or bring some sort of value to the planet, you know what I do? I go and I start asking them tons of questions. And because I know that they're working on something cool and they're really important and I want to learn from them and I want to highlight what they're doing and show it to other people. Think about it. You look down at Hollywood and Bollywood in India, and there's just so many of these different places around the world that are entertainers, athletes, actors, actresses, and
someone's got to do it.
And the films are normally something that there is enrichment to them, but it's not some sort of like, the people that we featured on here are doing things like, 3D printing organs or building decentralization platforms for people's identity so you can never just be taken off the face of the planet and lose all of your assets to corruption. It's like things like this that's why we're trying to highlight these types of things, because moving forward, how are we going to build a better world? So that's why.
Yeah, I realized that I kind of jumped ahead without actually introducing my listeners to what the Simulation Series is. And it's a show featuring some of the greatest scientists, technologists, entrepreneurs, and educators of our time. And you interview these amazing people that you find and ask them really profound questions. And one of the things that it says on your website is that you're rebirthing the public intellectual, inspiring you to build the future.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the context for the show. And some of the questions that you ask are crazy things, like, are we alone in the cosmos? And who will teach robots ethics?
Yeah.
And, ranging to what's the most beautiful thing in the world, and how do we balance the we are one mentality with geopolitical leadership, and really profound and challenging, deep questions. So I guess one thing I want to know is, now that you've done 160 episodes, what are some of the, not necessarily specific answers that you take away, but what's the meta learning that you've been able to, glimpse into from doing 160 interviews, asking those kind of questions?
Yeah, that's good that you mention that. You're talking about the description of what we're doing, and the description of what we're doing is kind of where I was just coming from as well. And it's like, this is why we do it, because we think it's so important to talk about these things in our world. And now, what have we uncovered as we've been talking to 160 of these people since January? Well, we have definitely learned that there is a lot of interconnectivity around all of these things. Tons.
That is, that makes so much sense to me. That makes so much sense, because I'm just listening to you start to think about your answer and realize that you cannot ask that level of depth in terms of question to that many people and come up with a specific. What you're going to get is a meta, and interconnectivity seems like a beautiful, profound, deep, and inevitable thing to be uncovering. So say more about that. Say more about interconnectivity as you personally see it, or as you pursue it, or interact with it now. How does that play out in your life or in the lives of the people around you?
Yeah, interconnectivity is such an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Whatever is teaching us that we're locked in this body and that I'm different than you, which I am, there is some sort of, energetic that is your ego and my ego, but then there is also the dissolution of the ego and then the oneness between us that we don't even understand. And so then there is this kind of spectrum between those two things, and, and I think doing things like practicing the continuous eradication of ego, but also bringing the ego up so that I can at least talk on this show is important. The interconnectivity of the different projects that are being built into this world. We rarely remember the butterfly effect, but the butterfly effect can be as simple as when you're on the street and you're holding a smile on your face and you look at someone and they're kind of neutral, they see you smiling, they start smiling, then they cascade that smile onto other people later that day, then they smile, and it just keeps going on. The butterfly effect's very simple. It doesn't need to be as complex as sometimes we explain it, but another way to view the butterfly effect in a more complex way is maybe the way that technology proliferates around the world. We never really realize that, oh man, like, there's these smartphones are going to be in the hands of 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds in a decade, and now they're in the hands of 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and we don't necessarily know what the screen time is being used for, and that has a direct implication onto the neural architecture of the child that is being raised into the world, and we don't know what exactly that's doing. But then there's also the benefit of that 3 or 5-year-old potentially being able to access YouTube videos that are teaching language or that are teaching art or music or other really important concepts like science, and all of a sudden that 3 or 5-year-old is just rocketing their intelligence forward because of this device. So I think it's important to understand butterfly effect can be massive scale, can be small scale, and also that can you believe the sheer interconnectivity of what actually goes on between humans, humans and technology, different countries on the planet, all these people that we've hosted on the show. It's so fascinating that one of them, we'll sit down, and then even during the episode, we'll be like, do you know this person? Do you know that person? Can we introduce you to that person? And then all of a sudden, we have 5 introductions that we have to make per episode to help people, achieve their goals. And they go and meet these people, and then they're like, oh my gosh, sometimes it's like, it was just a great meeting. But at other times they'll be like, we ended up pursuing a really important goal together and achieved it. And you just really wonder sometimes how a multidisciplinary approach to knowledge actually affects our understanding of the world. It's kind of that polymathic approach, because if we figure out how biology and evolution can be similar to blockchain and cryptocurrency, then we're finding very strange similarities, and we're able to kind of tap into a better understanding of how reality works, or how neuroscience is maybe linked or related to artificial intelligence, or how some very simple ones are like, you look at an atom, and atom's 99.999% space. You look at a star and the planets in the solar system, 99.999% space. Just some very interesting things like that just expand the mind to new dimensions of thought. And I wonder, what are these important ones, these dimensions of thinking that we want to bring to kids at the youngest possible age and in the most experiential and relatable ways? And that's kind of a lot of what I'm writing about right now.
And to me, it's not really about content. It's about what I'd call metacognition or meta-learning skills. And we may have already talked about that, because something that I really like to think about with regards to how people learn. And it's very relevant to this idea of being a polymath and drawing on a lot of different topics and intersecting them, which is something that I'm always fascinated by. And so it takes us to, well, what is the overarching piece, the overarching thinking that we get from doing all that interconnectivity? So I'm wondering if there are particular topics. I know from my show there are certain currents that keep coming up in spite of myself. I have no idea that I'm not choosing people on the basis of they're going to fit into this theme, but there's certain themes that just come up over and over again. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that. Besides interconnectivity, you already raised interconnectivity, but are there other similar themes that just keep showing up? Or that you keep recognizing? Because a lot of it is through your lens. What's the lens through which you're having the conversation?
Hard work.
Hard work.
Hard work.
Yes.
I think it was Elon that said that if you work 100 hours a week and someone else works 40 hours a week, that you'll be able to achieve what takes them a year you can do in 4 months. And I was like, that's how people get ahead of each other in the world. That people work their freaking asses off. And sometimes people catch themselves working a lot and they're not actually getting
a
lot done, or they're not
spinning wheels.
But at the same time, it's like, if you find work that doesn't even feel like work, it feels like it's actually part of your life and your passion and what you care about doing every single day, then why not dedicate time to building that? And to me, it's leaving behind, and I think to a lot of the guests that we have on the show, the pattern that we see is that the amount of hard work and dedication into building these projects, it's about leaving behind not a legacy for that person, but more about an impact on the world that is beneficial and that just goes way past themselves.
So I'm wondering if that's another theme that you see, because I would say it is in my show that there's a certain kind of generosity or magnanimous, kind of orientation that people that I tend to be attracted to hearing from. Yes, they're smart people and they're accomplished people, but there's something that goes outside of their own fulfillment of their own ego. So I've felt that as a theme in the conversation, from the very beginning. So I'm guessing that might show up.
Yeah. It's like bringing us again to the circle of, like, I'm 25, we're going to live until we're 100, hopefully, right? Mm-hmm. And that's such a short period of time. The best we can do is try and leave the world a better place than where we found it, and help others along the way, eradicate some suffering, push to a better world, a better future ahead of us. And it's just like the whole time scale thing. Like, what benefit would it be to just want to consume and just consume? We talk a lot about creation and the importance of wanting to make and build, and that being such an important trait for kids as well as they find themselves being birthed into this world.
I love that vision. I think I'm touched by your vision and your expression of it. You're very articulate.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if there's, I've got to get to your superpowers and then wrap up, but I'm wondering, you have interviewed all these people, and I'm wondering if there are any specifics that come to mind, like anyone come to mind as triggering some sense of like, whoa, that blew my mind. Anything, any particular thoughts or ideas that were really transformative or really shifted something for you that you can think of that someone brought to you through your show? And I know it's kind of putting you on the spot because sometimes recall is hard, but.
Yeah, isn't it strange how difficult recall is?
Yeah.
That we live day by day, week by week, year by year, and form just these connections in our brain about who we are, and then when we're challenged to recall things.
Yeah, I know. So I recognize that it can be challenging.
What comes up when you recall things? Well, I'm definitely very blessed to have talked to Jordan Peterson on our show, and I think he keeps a very high level, like, civilizational overview of how things are going on. He also his superpowers that he's had just tens of thousands of hours of talking to people, and that's what happens as a professor of psychology and a clinical psychologist. You just take a lot of time with people and understand patterns. We haven't had the chance to talk to Tony Robbins yet, but Tony Robbins also just has these 40 plus years of just understanding human behavior, understanding human patterns, and it's just a very high level view. So, like, something that a lot of the people that we've had on the show have is this high level view. Like, why do you care about decentralized AI economies, right? We had Dan Galey on the show, and Dan Galey's talking about, well, Amazon has this silo of information, and they don't talk to Facebook's silo of information. They don't talk to Google's silo of information. But when you open those up to each other, you will have profoundly fascinating insights about yourself and about the way that you communicate and work in this world. And so people have bigger picture understandings of things, and that, I think, is a reoccurring pattern of people that we have on the show, is big picture. Like, why are we here on this pale blue dot? Why does it matter? What are we going to do moving forward? How do we build a beautiful world together? And let's figure that out, because when we don't have conversation, you end up like North Korea, and when you do have conversation, you end up like South Korea. It's a very powerful example in the world after the Korean War. One's inclusive, one's exclusive. and you can see what happens across that borderline. South Korea is like the 11th best economy in the world, and a lot of people suffer in North Korea in many ways. And so if we as a planet figure out how to work together in a better way, which I think we're totally on path to do with more people having higher level conversations and projects that they're working on, we will prosper. We'll become interplanetary, and that's a major step for us, is to become interplanetary. And then I think another major step is for us to figure out how me having something doesn't preclude somebody else from having something. It's like digital music.
Yeah.
If I can have access to a YouTube video and you can have access to a YouTube video, we don't have to fight over it. So if I can have access to an Apple and you can have access to an Apple, we don't have to fight over it. So this sort of idea of having enough for anybody to be able to kind of summon whatever they want, whenever they want, actually is going to be huge for us. So I think these are kind of some baby steps for us on this, maybe multi-100-year picture that I hope to help pass down. And we're going to do that through the massive live events as we get to, sports stadiums and filling sports stadiums for full-day, multidisciplinary events. We're going to throw in some art and music and culture and networking and meditation throughout these panels of blockchain and AI and biotech and neurotech and globalization, geopolitics and emotional intelligence. And I have to just link back to you again, Lisa, is just that, you dig out very interesting things from people. And I think that's it's like a superpower of yours, is that you care a lot about learning from somebody else and you know how to ask really good questions. And again, you're not, like, I focus a lot on the intellectual side of things, but I also care a lot about emotion and feeling and energy. But for you to ask as a first question, like, talk to me about your mom, like, talk to me about her influence on your life, right? So I'm glad that, you've refined and you've tuned to something unique, and that's a good one. And I think Tony Robbins actually does that quite a bit himself.
Oh, really? Nice.
He definitely figures out about the person's like mom and dad and like lineage and.
Well, I think you're recognizing that piece that he has done so much work, and I think I heard him say something like he just sees the systems; they're right there. He can see the system because he's done it so much. So I think that's really clear in hearing him talk. I think I want to recognize in something that you said that I really appreciate, that I also like as a basis, is like, go deep, right? Go deep, whether it's from the intellectual point of view or the emotional point of view or the intersection between them. Like, let's just keep going deep. And I want to give my listeners a chance to know how they can follow what you're doing. So maybe you can just talk about it, and I will definitely link everything that you say and everything you point to in the show notes, so people will be able to go to the show notes to find it. But just maybe verbally give some idea about how people can follow what you're doing. And I know you just described some of this big picture future vision of stadiums and more intersectionality between ideas and people. But for now, where can people follow the work that you're doing?
Simulationseries.com is the easiest way to follow our work. We do our daily show is live streamed to YouTube and Facebook. Just youtube.com/simulation series, facebook.com/simulation series. Twitter, we're Simulation Show. We post there a lot. Instagram, Simulation Series on Instagram. And just personally, you can follow me. It's just alansakyan.com, Alan Sakyan on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Another interesting thought maybe for your following is that there's probably an intersectionality between our audiences in terms of how much they care about listening to diverse perspectives and people that are aiming to build the future. And so whoever is tuning in from Superpower U, join our community, and from people tuning into Simulation, join into the Superpower U community. And we have links on our video as well in the bio to the Superpower U podcast community. So definitely check them out as well. And then let's get a little bit of marriage happen. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a civil union.
I love it. Yeah, but the best way for your listeners to follow what we're doing is on the Superpower U Facebook page, and I try to post stuff there, so that'd be awesome. Now, it would not be the Superpower U podcast if we didn't not only dance around and discuss in general terms your superpower, but really try to identify it and put words to it, because words are so powerful. So if I was to throw it over to you, what might you suggest as your superpower?
That's a good question, and
I have some thoughts.
yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts after this. Okay, so I think on episode 37 when we featured you, that I think that you had a really good superpower. I think I asked you back, and then you asked me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even remember what I answered.
I know, it was like, hey, I was
which is
37,
good.
you're at 160. You're not going to remember that level of detail.
And it's also good to like iterate. It kind of reminds me of like, when someone takes a picture of you when you're, in your days of grade school, and then you see like year after year how your grade school picture changes. That's also kind of like what this is that your superpower is kind of going to change over time. Your essence augments over time. And so, I think right now what it is for me is that it's this, like when I look, I see through a different lens, I think, than a lot of people do. And that's one of the things that I see as this augmentation to lens is that if you guys have ever seen that video where it takes you all the way from the human perspective of like two people talking, and it takes you all the way down to the Planck scale, to the very smallest scale.
The Power of 10 video?
The Power of 10 video.
That's
And then
a beautiful
it
video.
goes you all the way back through the humans and out through the cosmic scale to the universal scale, right? I spend a lot of my time thinking about the Earth as a pale blue dot. And I really think about it as like how I spend a lot of my time in Google Earth. And I purposely do so because it draws me to Africa, it draws me to Asia, it draws me to the scale of our planet. And when I learned about the Roaring Forties, which is this wind, it's this wind that wraps around the southern hemisphere between like 40 and 50 degrees latitude, and it's 17 to 27 miles an hour consistently, and there's no landmass blocking it. So you can sail around the Earth in 40 days, 40. And if you can sail around the Earth in 40 days, it's a pretty small place. So it's really important for us to not only figure out how to take care of it sustainably, regeneratively over time, but also to prosper and get to the next rocks. And so I really think about Earth through this lens of like, how do we augment civilization in all these different ways? When I walk around, I think about wanting to solve problems and how we solve those problems. And that's just a different way of perception. So I think that's part of the superpower. And then also another part of the superpower is just asking people, getting past the surface level fast. Like enough with the surface level stuff. Yeah. And for the people where they have to be tickled in the surface level for a bit, or that they only want to stay in the surface level, like that's fine, like do it. But like if you want to emotionally or intellectually get to people's hearts and brains quickly, then go up to them and ask them, hey, what are you passionate about? What are you building into our world?
Yep.
And show them that genuine care for hearing out their answer. Give them eye contact, use your eyebrows. These eyebrows evolved so that you could have more nuance in your emotional expression. And so, you just raise your eyebrows because you're like, that shows interest. And so I think asking powerful questions and wanting to break through surface level conversations, another one of these superpowers, and building a really powerful future together.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, some of the things that come to mind, and it's hard to encapsulate. I usually try to encapsulate what someone's superpower is in a phrase, and that's a lot of superpower to put into one phrase. But some of the things that I hear are go deep, go fast, go deep fast, and also something like scaling perspective or a scaled perspective, or you could just say big picture viewpoint. But it's more than that actually. It's the simple or superficial way to say that your superpower is a big picture view, but I think it's way more nuanced than that. And I'm not sure what the phraseology is, but it's something like scaling the vision or something.
I think good words that you just helped me think of were scale, and then lens and scale, and then also depth. For especially in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I so appreciate you. I appreciate the people that you're bringing onto your show and how you're interacting with them and what your intention is to give to the world, and how you're all about connecting up all of our ideas and for the good of the future generations and our population here now.
Thanks so much for having me on your show, Lisa. It's been a freaking pleasure. I love being on, someone else's show. It's so fun. Like, I get to not have to ask questions as much, and that's fun. But it also is it's a true blessing to have Ron helping us produce and direct, and
Yep.
It's a blessing having this network of people like yourself and Keith who connected us, and all these other people. It's just, what the hell? We're so great. Great gratitude.
Yes.
You can't be angry
Yes.
and grateful at the same time.
Oh my gosh, thank you for ending with that, because I think the idea of gratitude, the experience of gratitude, is something so easy to forget, and it's so powerful as a starting point for every transformation that we want to make. So I thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
So much love. Thanks, Lisa.